Welcome back to part 2 of this week's Melbourne Pro Punters panel. As usual, we're brought to you by One to Follow and Top Batter. We've got the big Blue Diamond tournament coming up for the tournament betting, so that's something to look forward to. Make sure you get involved there, and you can always get pots of stuff at One to Follow, so make sure you head there, and there's plenty of good articles. And
we had another good week last week, Juppy.
Yes, my sports tips were slightly down, but other than that it was alright. So
we shot the lights out at Sandown last Wednesday.
Yes.
Found a really nice winner at Moonee Valley on Friday night and Brutal Reward. And then after getting into a fairly deep hole on Saturday, we fought our way out of it and finished day in front. So it's all good.
It is good.
Can't complain.
So as we mentioned earlier, we've got Andrew Hannon with us. Industry.
Talking about paying bills, just so I forgot. Our good friend Ralphie.
Oh, hello, Ralph.
He's got some things coming up with Vince. They're usually on a Friday. There was one this week for the Blue Diamond. There's another one coming up in a couple more weeks' time. So anyone that wants to go and learn a bit more about Vince's stuff, look up Ralphie's website. I think you'll find everything you want there.
And if anyone wants to talk about Springsteen, just get in touch with Ralphie on Twitter.
And you'll get that for free, Springsteen stuff.
To death.
Even if you don't want it.
Yeah. So make sure you head over there. So as we mentioned, we're joined by Andrew. Andrew, you've been doing bits and bobs. I see you've been doing some stuff with Best Bets. You've been doing some form for them. But how did you get into the game?
Oh, it's a good question. I've sort of just first got interested in race analysis more than horse racing, which is probably an interesting bit. I sort of just got interested in listening to Dean Lester, who's been a massive mentor of mine and probably still is. I also played footy with Lockie Hunter at school, so obviously his old man's Mark Hunter. After footy on a Saturday to ask him questions, and he was sort of helping me without him knowing that he was helping me.
Wow, so you're really young, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm 23.
Wow.
So, sort of been framing markets since I was 17 in year 12, sort of distracted me a bit from school.
So when you were 17 framing markets at school, were you accepting bets? Were you making a book or?
No, I went to a very strict private school.
Right.
And they would have kicked me out in a second if I was doing that. But
I guarantee you someone was doing it, you just didn't know about it.
Yeah, well, that's right, yeah. You know, I got to a point in year 12 where, you know, I played a bit of cricket and that was obviously all day on Saturday, and I decided I'd rather play thirds volleyball, which was done by 10 a.m. on Saturdays. So I could jump off to the races and autumn carnival, and that was good. And then I sort of learnt a lot very quickly. I was very absorbed in it, and
so when you learn a lot, so you're 17, you're saying where did you learn a lot? How did you do that?
Well, it originally started with Dean Lester and Mark Hunter, and probably...
How did you know Dean at that age?
I just approached him at the races one day, sweating myself, and but he was great, and he still is, and we talk every now and then, which is good.
That's just a lot about him, that he's happy for a young bloke come talk, and he's...
I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one. Yeah, he's a fantastic mentor for young guys. And just reading as much as I possibly can, whether it's previews from other people, academic papers, you name it. Obviously got my hands on the Don Scott book. That was a bit of a help, although a lot of it's outdated now. And yeah, learn a lot very quickly. And just
in terms of a how-to guide, it's very thin on the ground, isn't it? You know what I mean? You have to get bits and pieces from, you know, wherever you can find.
Yeah, and I thought what also helped was I didn't really have any pretenses going into form analysis.
Yes.
Like, I wasn't passionate about horse racing like most people and then get into form analysis. I was just straight to form analysis.
Yeah.
So you go out there probably with a bit more open eyes and sort of focus on that a bit more than your actual passion for horse racing. So I found that really beneficial.
I think the other thing you probably miss out on is some of the myths that are then perpetuated by media types and whatnot when they're giving those previews that but it's drawn wide and it's...
That's absolutely true, Juppy. I was interested in horse racing from the time I was 8, I would say, and I started taking it really seriously when I was right age, about 37.
Yeah.
I think. And the first 2 years that I was making a living out of it, I had to unlearn everything that I knew.
Yeah.
You had to completely unlearn it. So, I mean, that's an advantage. First of all, you're young. So
that helps.
That's a head start.
Because I feel like I'm 206.
Myself. But not having to unlearn all those things about, there's just we could make a long list of them, inside barriers being an advantage, people just take that as a given because they listen to trainers.
Or it's got 60 kilos.
60 kilos, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a million myths that you have to back away from, but you didn't have to do any of that. That's good. So you started doing markets.
Yeah.
When did you start actually betting on the prices you were assessing?
Probably before I was 18, to be honest. But, sort of.
And so when you were young, what kind of punter were you?
I was framing markets and betting proportionally to them.
Backing a lot of horses in a race?
Yeah. I learned pretty early. Back multiple runners, don't be afraid to do it, always take overlays, all that. Yeah. And it's adapted pretty quickly since then. But not only would you mention that I didn't have the pretensions on certain variables in horse races, but also I didn't have any pretensions on how to do the form. Yeah. So a lot of people from probably around your age bracket, maybe including you, Potts, you struggle with the automation of things and the computerisation of form analysis. Yeah. I'm from the age where I grew up with social media and all telephones and all that, so I was pretty quick to understand that's the way forward. Yeah. And that really helped me. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm sure, particularly people from your generation, if I sat here and I have a computer database and there's a lot of advanced technology in what I do, but I still do some things manually because it helps me get a feel for the race. It's just the way I've done it right from the start, right? So, but if I showed you how I did a race, you'd be horrified. You'd say, "Boy, this is wasting so much time." And I'm sure you're looking down at this page and you're seeing me handwriting out times from the weekend, and you're probably laughing your head off. But well, I have a computer screen with it all in front of me. I have, I get sectional times and everything else, but I still like seeing them in a certain order and things like that. And I don't.
We better give him his weekly mention. Hello, Nathan. Snowy, he's in the same boat. He's got the same database as Potter's got, and he said he's probably using it to 10 to 20% of his capacity because he's using it for a fraction of what it's able to do because he's sort of my vintage where it's you'd have to really go into it to learn it, but if you're brought up with it in second nature, it does become a hell of a lot easier.
And the point is also that you may not think a lot of young people are coming through, and that's probably true, not as many as you'd hope. But it's because the people that are coming through aren't like the way you do forms. You don't really relate to them. They're basically quantitative analysts. Yeah. And it's all computerised. So instead of them looking at form, they're writing code. Yeah. That's the modern way of doing it. So they may not be horse racing fans, but they do bet on horse racing. Yeah. It's just the modern way, isn't it? It's like any other industry. It's all getting computerised.
It doesn't matter how you come to a position, but if you come to a position that allows you to bet with an edge over the market, that's what it's all about. Yeah. It doesn't. Yeah. The how, it doesn't. There's different ways. There's a lot of ways of skinning a cat. So you started at 17. You started betting straight away. Were you doing? Just talk us through what your process was then. Were you doing speed maps? What was behind your version of form analysis?
Yeah. So I had a partner in crime, Jim. Hello, he'll be watching. He's been lost to the industry, unfortunately. One of the good guys gone, but we basically were a partnership. I did Melbourne, he did Sydney. Back then, very early days, it was probably the way you do it. Some objective variables, but having to do it manually. Yeah. Start off with the speed maps, had my ratings, but had to analyse them manually and try and do it as consistently as possible. Yeah. And then from there, we slowly tried to automate some of the variables until it became pretty much fully automated. And once we got to that point, we thought we could be betting around more places, and probably got to a point where we were probably betting too much. I mean, you've got to draw a line somewhere. If you 7 days a week, some night racing now, 2-3 times a week, and we're looking at Hong Kong as well, and you do have to draw a line, otherwise you go crazy. And, we're young, you still want to have a social life, and I'm also studying at uni. Had a lot on my plate very young, and to be honest, my uni marks were diminishing because of it, and you have to try and change that. And
so since you've started, you've worked continuously on more automation in your method. Yeah. So how much manual interference is there now in what your final betting market will be on a given race?
Well, it's interesting because in recent times I've actually sold aspects of my database. I was doing some stuff with Nathan at Champion Picks, and this was a time when there was no minimum bet rule.
Yeah.
It only recently come in New South Wales. Betfair liquidity was dropping a bit.
Yeah.
There was talk coming out the offshore betting was going to become illegal. So bet dropped off everything. And at my young age, I had to look at and go, is this an environment that, I'd rather go out too early than too late?
Yeah.
And
I hope the racing administrators are listening, or someone points them in this direction. Here's a young guy with an interest, wants to bet, and he was thinking about, should I be putting my time into this?
Yeah, so I was making moves to focus more on my uni stuff and actually get into the business of racing, or the business side, because I'm interested in economics and what that as well. And so, there was a good offer there for certain parts of my database that I thought I'd take, because I eventually thought it will be outdated. Yeah. I'd rather sell it early than late, and then, they buy it and they've still got a few years there to make a profit from it. So I thought it was a fair deal. And now that it's come all of a sudden a lot more rosier for punters in Victoria and New South Wales, doing a great job with the minimum bet rule. Just testing out a new system, which is a lot different to the one that I used to have, and just sort of doing some testing on it at the moment, and just see how it goes. So I'm hoping to finish uni by the end of the year, so that's probably my main focus. I've also got the stuff with Best Bets, which is great. That keeps me engaged in the industry.
Well, if you're interested in the administration side, there's plenty of jobs at Racing Victoria. We need a new captain.
Well, I'd love to
Why not?
Yeah, I'd love to be. Although I'm interested in business, I'm interested in wagering business.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Not so much.
Oh, you just disqualified yourself. You got no.
I don't know much about the trainers and the breeders and all that. You can't know everything, so maybe I'm not quite sure. I'd love to get some international experience as well. Just see how we go. I've got a few doors open.
So, what degree are you studying at the minute? Commerce. Okay.
So can I just ask you, with your new model now, that's largely automated?
Yeah, fully
automated.
Yeah.
How do you deal with sectional times?
Not to get too specific, but our system is a lot more weight on overall time than sectional times, because there are a lot of horses out there that can run a good sectional but don't win, but most horses that run a good time do win races. So it is quite complex. It is a significant factor.
Okay, let's say we've got
a
feed race that was 1,400 metres, and the race on the next week, let's say that in that 1,400 metre race there was a dead heat, and the two horses carried the same weight, and that race was run, in just say about average time for the first half and really quick the second half of the race. And the next week, those two dead heaters, one goes to a 1,600 metre race and the other one goes to a 1,200 metre race. How does your program handle that?
You obviously got to factor in all the variables for that race. There's obviously a lot more variables than just one goes up in trip and one goes down in trip. But there is certain distance trips that are harder to get up and come down from. But for example, a 1,000 metre race is a hell of a lot different to a 1,200. 2,000 I feel is a hell of a lot different to 2,400. I feel like 1,400 and 1,600 reasonably similar, comparable to all the other ones. So there's a lot more to factor in than that to try.
No, the reason I'm asking for the punters is that I've become fascinated with the platform run for horses and what difference it makes from a certain race if the horses out of that race spread off in different directions, and what is the most advantageous for them? Is it from a certain race shape, staying at the same distance, dropping back in distance and going up? I've been putting a lot of work into that, and it's something that I'm interested in how the big computer teams and you handle that, because there is a distinct pattern that I'm finding.
Well, I think the key to those sort of things, you don't want to generalise. Every horse is different, and that's part of the new AI models that are coming into horse racing, is that they don't do any generalisations. It's all about each horse is different and crunching numbers about what benefits that horse.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to make a generalisation, going from a fast race and then going up and trip particularly maybe more 1600 to 2000 than 1400 to 1600 is a bit of a query, because particularly in, well, most people probably watching focus on Melbourne and Sydney, they are very tempo related races now. Results are very tempo related. Jockeys try to be very fancy. You do have to be careful.
Yeah. There's a perfect example tomorrow. There's a horse that ran well at Moonee Valley in a very fast 1600 metre race. It's going up to 2100 metre race. It's an even money favourite, and it will have all sorts of trouble coping with the tempo change.
There you go.
It's Trent Busselton horse, Red River or something.
Andrew, a question I've got is, through the evolution of what you've been doing in building the database and whatnot, and you say now that most of it's automated, so when you sort of first began, how much time was taken in like the physical betting side of it, and then the programming side? Like, what was the sort of balance there to up to what it is now? Because I assume now it's pretty much all automated, so it's nearly, most of the work you're doing is more sort of the coding and building the database and working on the algorithm.
Yeah, well, it is. Well, the first thing we automated was the database, and then the betting was done manually, and then we got APIs and so forth, publicly accessible.
Yeah.
And that becomes, it was long hours. Still is quite long hours, but oh jeez, it was pretty, for a Saturday meeting, you're pretty flat out Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday night, Thursday.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of Friday morning. And that was, for starters, just the Saturday Melbourne meet.
Yeah.
And then Jim would do the
Sydney meet. Yeah.
And then the rest of your time on a Friday, you might have to look at a Friday night meeting or whatever and do your best. But yeah, I think a lot of people in the horse racing industry, not just four-man horse, don't get much sleep. So
it's also funny you mentioned with the workload there. Like, I know of one of the big teams, they have Sundays off every week, and it's simply to manage the workload of the people working for them. And them and the family pressures that are associated with it. And it's completely understandable. We have so much product now. For those who are wondering what Punters is doing, they've just run the last...
It was the great Velastar going under there. Another one that couldn't cope with the tempo change. 1100 to 1400, no good.
That's the... I assume that's the last race at...
the bottom. Is that who won it? I can't see.
Seymour today.
Lost command, there we go.
nice one.
Andrew's marked at $4 and it's gone around, it looks like about $5.70 on the tote.
$5.70 best tote.
Yes, well done. I didn't have a bet in that race, but I thought Velastar was extremely vulnerable.
Well, horses always get overbet if they're extremely unlucky.
Yeah, unlucky in a 1100 metre race.
Werribee was
not a very good preparation for a 1400 metre run.
No.
So, have you finished answering that question? Yes. Sorry, because I was a bit distracted there.
Were you?
How's your model coping with the, I don't even know how to describe it, dynamic, massive, incredible fluctuations in the market from 9 o'clock now?
Yeah, so we sort of taken the option because majority of our betting is done in non-fixed odds.
Oh, okay, you're betting in the parimutuel? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we just figured out it's just best to bet late.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, that's
you do gather a lot of information in that final 2 minutes. Whether you, I mean, you might lose an overlay every now and then, but you do gather a lot of information.
The fixed odds market at the moment is becoming so volatile. It's like it's Russian roulette if you have all your bet in one go.
Yeah, and I think looking up Twitter and the media and all that, I think people are very...
Thank you, Jared. Good man.
They're too easy to click on the button to have an early bet. Yeah. If I had to give advice to people is, if you think it's just over the odds, I'd advise not to have the early bet. You got to be saying this is wrong.
Yeah.
You can't just saying, I could be 50 cents short or whatever on race day. Don't worry about those. You get the ones, this is simply wrong. They're the ones where you bet.
I'm giving up some of my IP here, but I would say to punters, you have to think the price is wrong based on your own assessment, and more importantly, you have to be convinced that the big teams are going to find it, because it will not start shorter than the price you're looking at if the big teams don't find it.
And yeah, you got to be careful with certain jurisdictions about the market percentages that go up on Saturday mornings.
Yeah,
particularly outside Melbourne and Sydney.
I noticed it on as everyone knows, I pickle away at some of the smaller meetings, and I did so. My weekend was I went to Moonee Valley Friday night, Bendigo Saturday, Ballarat Sunday, especially at Bendigo with being the secondary Victorian meeting. The amount of money that now, at the minute that it takes to set horses off, is minuscule. And if if there's a small trickle on Betfair, and you knock it off with one or two key corporates, that horse will just collapse, and it's getting worse.
But then if the big teams don't find it, it'll just bounce back, Jumpy.
That's true.
So like Canedna on Saturday morning, I marked at $8, and I just wanted to get some of myself set there, right? So I had some money at $9.50, I think it was.
Yep.
An hour later, it was into $7 everywhere. It's traded $14 on Betfair.
Yeah.
I think it's jumped 10 and paid about $10 on the totes. Like the fluctuations in that horse, and we talked about another one Oak Door the week before.
Yeah.
The reason that Canedna was never going to start as short as it got into was because the big teams weren't going to focus on it. There was too many variables in that race for them.
So and as you mentioned, Juppy, market speculation is very high at the moment, and these big teams know it.
Yeah.
These big teams know. Once you know something's going to happen before others, that is an advantage.
It's a
huge advantage.
So these big players know, okay, we're going to back this horse. We know it's going to come in more than a couple of rolls on the board. That is an advantage to know that. So
it's more than that. They know how.
Yeah.
They've been able to read the play how the corporates work.
Yeah.
They don't even have to back it with every corporate now to shorten it across the board. They can if they want to, but if they just want to use a horse to get the one they really want to back out.
Well, it provides.
They can say, we'll back Canedna now. That'll get extra olives out to where we really want it.
Yeah, and it's not only that. It's not only going to affect other horses' prices. It gives extraordinary arbitrage opportunities. For this big team. So
absolutely.
And
I'd say if you take the fluck now, forget the VOP. The corporate fluck from 9 in the morning through to jump time is well into the 90s in most races.
Well, it's what the old Encore's top fluck used to be.
Yeah,
because the old
it's even more volatile.
Because like you'd regularly see that when we were taking it off course especially in some Melbourne and Sydney, if there was horses that were back like that, the top fluck could get down to 95. But there's plenty of those races now where, as you say, Potts, if you took the 9 o'clock prices onwards, and especially at the less liquid meetings, it's wild stuff.
If you can catch the key runners at the right time of the market, there's a lot of opportunity there to improve your margins.
Well, a good example of that was we backed a horse on Saturday called Flofo at Bendigo. We took 40s and SP'd 6s, and it's just because it's the wild ride and everything that happens in between. So when you're doing that, that's such a big chunk of percentage there that the markets are just all over the place. And as you say, Andrew, that's especially what I find with the younger guys. There's a lot more of that happening. There's trading in and out of markets, trying to identify the ones that are going off, try and get them near the top, get out when you can, and just nipping and tucking and building a position in a race. Yeah. There's a lot more of that happening.
But to conclude, like, you're always going to find exceptions like that one at Bendigo, and they're the ones that you remember in your brain. But I'd say if you're in doubt, wait.
Yeah.
Because mathematics, the market percentage is going to be in your favour.
And the other thing that a lot of punters fall into the trap of, especially ones that are sort of getting services where they're eating pots, like I get a couple of them, is if you miss the price early, don't panic. Don't take the unders, don't take when it's gone off. As you say, wait. Because with some of these products now, it gets right back out, especially if the big teams don't like it, and you're probably going to wind up with equal value or overs, especially unless it's a complete rig and it's 5 ticks wrong than what it should be.
Yeah, so I mean, I've spent a lot of time into my prices and trying to nail them down as much as I can, but just say on an 8 race card I'm betting in every race. I'm typically trying to back somewhere between 25 and 30 horses in those races. I'll probably only back half a dozen of them early. 25 of them or so, I'll be happy to take the top fluck or the best of 4 or whatever I can get set for. Yeah. So if you backed all 30 of them early, you'd completely take the wrong prices.
Well, the percentages are just completely against you because, as you said, like some of those markets are 125, 130%. Like it's a big.
Once they level out, they are. I mean, the first market they put up, they basically the opening markets. They'll all put up about 130.
Yeah.
But they'll be dips. So if you take the best price every runner, you can.
Yeah.
Typically, it might be between 110 and 115, but you're still betting into a percentage.
Yeah.
And then once it levels out, the VOP is coming down to typically between 110 and 113.
Yeah, that's about right.
And
for
the sake of a roll or two, betting late, you might know what the bias is like, maybe horse in the yard if you're into that, all that. For the sake of maybe a small penalty, and you're not quite sure. Let's be honest.
Well, the added information overcomes that penalty over time.
Exactly. And
I suppose, Andrew, you're probably looking at it too, where you're looking at sample size and looking at over a great number of bets and big data samples, which is
that's right.
what all the quants guys that I know are always looking for, and that's what makes it hard. Like some looking at it from a sporting point of view, like the NFL's always tricky because it's such a short season. Like there's an enormous amount of data out there, but then you compare it to like baseball where it's a 162 game season and it does even out over the course of the season. So
sample size is very important.
So what have we done? So you're still doing anything for best bets, or is that?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm doing mainly Victorian stuff.
Okay.
Got Mooney Valley this Friday night.
There you go.
And as I mentioned, it does.
Do you have to do those off the noms or off the acceptances?
Well, I'm in a fortunate position because the majority of my stuff is automated, so. I can get a market and then I can just write the comments from that market.
Right.
I mean, it's tough for these best bets analysts. I know some people get frustrated that, we'll tip a horse but it might be very short or whatever, but we don't know. The deadlines are so tight. I mean, for example, my deadline tomorrow for Mooney Valley Friday night's noon.
Yeah, on Wednesday, wow.
And then Race of Victoria can be quite slow giving out the Friday night field. Sometimes they're out at 11 and I might be half an hour late, but that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
So it's hard to factor in what you think is going to be value and what's going to be overlay or underlay or whatever, because you really don't know. So you just got to go with the top rated runner and go from there. But I sort of enjoy that because it does keep me engaged. When you've just got an automated database, automated betting, you don't really feel engaged with the industry.
Yeah.
You just you're watching Sky and just watching horses go around, looking at the results and then move on to the next race in 90 seconds. Through this, it does keep me engaged.
That goes back to another point that a former guest, when we had the rat on, Mark Roden, he said like the influence that best bets and the form comments and the tips within them can have on the overall market. And that's it's part of the reason why it sort of has to go out that early. Like, I know a lot of guys who are either bookies or well respected, like that is the Bible, that's what they're using to do their form off, and they sort of need as much time as they can. So they're not only are they using the raw form stats, but they're then using the comments to factor it in. I know sometimes when I do form manually, it's genuinely what I use. So it is a delicate balancing act, especially if they're big fields.
I feel it has a great place in the industry because for people my age in particular, it is really a starting point to get your form analysis interest going.
Yep.
When they're not, when they think, I'm going to do form, they're not straight away thinking all these big databases and whatnot. They think I'm going to start with the best bets, and then they go to the news agents on a Thursday and buy it, and then best bets is mainly used for people doing their own form, but I'm sure they use our tips and comments as sort of confirmation for their opinion.
Yep.
So they'd look at, they'd say, I like this one, then they'd look at our tips and go, oh, he likes it too.
Yeah.
And that's why we're there. I think that's the major reason why we're there. And I think it's a great starting point for young guys.
It's for two things. Like, you guys are there for the people who don't want to read it and just want to look at that and go, okay, here's the recommended betting selection, here's the order, here's the track surface. Okay, we can use that to sort of come up with what we're doing. Or, as you say, you're getting that confirmation. That's the hardest thing when you're setting out and you're sort of beating your own path, is sometimes it does help to have that confirmation that similar people are thinking along the same lines, because especially if you're using the Kelly criterion, like you might think you got a big overlay and you can knock off a chunk of your bank, but basically it comes down to the fact that actually you've mispriced the horse. The market was actually right. Like, as Dominic Byrne's been saying, like, never underestimate the collective intelligence of the market.
Yeah, and that's right. That's why, databases like mine, I'm sure a lot of others, they do factor in the public price into their final betting assessments.
Yeah.
And, it's critical. You can't just think the public's stupid,
No, well, and the thing is, that's why probably as something that, Mark Lamb will sort of put it was the SP profiling. Like, you have to look at that when you're doing the form, because it does show what the market expected of it at the previous run.
Exactly, yeah. I think, as Mark mentioned, he's a very astute guy. He said it's almost the most important variable to factor into your analysis.
Yeah.
To think, how was this horse expected to perform?
Yeah, and against how it did perform.
You see how it performed and then you figure out why. So.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think that'll just about do us for this week.
Talking about Mark Lambert, there was something I wanted to say before we close off part 2.
Fire away.
I do still have a look at the racing round, even though the boys have all gone to war with each other, which is unfortunate for us, Chuck, because we were friends with all of them.
We were caught in the middle.
But they were talking on Monday's show about a horse they've got, and they've got some shares, and 2 of the people that are in it are Dave Emanuel and Daniel Paoloni. I'd just say anyone that decides to join that syndicate, you will not find 2 better guys than Dan Paoloni and Dave Emanuel. I miss you, Dave. I hope you come back sometime soon. And so anyone that joins that syndicate will have a great time with 2 incredibly astute racing people.
And there's one thing you guarantee, that you're going to have fun.
You're going to be betting.
Yeah, you will be betting. They do like betting, those
boys. Those boys.
So make sure you head to Top Better first and jump in the Blue Diamond Day tournament. That'll be a big tournament, well worth getting involved in. Completely different way of betting, but really intriguing.
What's the top prize?
Don't ask me questions off the stick that I don't know the answer. And also head to One to Follow to grab Potts' set. Andrew, thanks so much for coming in, mate. We really appreciate it.
We're going to do a part 3, Juppy. Just a quick thing. I've got to answer a staking question for one of our...
all right.
Is that all right?
I'll will myself on. We'll be back shortly with part 3, talking about staking.